It's time.
Hey, it's Soul, and welcome back to another episode of Warcraft Weekly, the show that will, help a few minutes go by while you wait for your mission table to spit back another failure. As usual, a huge thanks to all of the support coming from our Twitch subscribers and the patrons, including Autumn and Jonathan, who are really stepping it up. Thank you very much. This week we enjoy another week of not so much bombshells, but still important updates as Shadowlands the launch is behind us, but seeing it all fall into place, well, that's still happening. We're in the final week before Season 1 begins, and just like this past Tuesday, you can expect a brief guide to take you through what will be available so you won't be so overwhelmed. I know I've said this numerous times, but I've been pretty happy with how players are being just kind of eased into the expansion. We're used to something like, alright Blizzard, alright, give it to me, right now! Followed by, oh, is that it? Where's the content, yo? But this time around, it's kind of different. One long tail system after another, being laid down kind of like train tracks. Okay, it's time gating, but I really think Blizzard nailed it this time around. So some real quick WoW classic news. Next Ramus opened this week, and it went down faster than it takes to travel there from Encourage, on foot, at like RP walking speed. Okay, I'm bad at this. It was done in about an hour, but among fans, all but those with the thickest of tinted glasses totally saw this coming. The final phase of WoW Classic was crushed under the weight of world buffs and optimization and years worth of experience. That said, the not-so-world-first players have a lot to look forward to, and they should have a jolly good time. With a classic Burning Crusade all but confirmed, we've got to wonder what's in store for what will soon be called Classic Vanilla. My prediction from many moons ago was that its endgame would be found in PvP, but we've also been seeing players create challenges for themselves in the form of completing raids with like a single class, or performing with far fewer than the intended number of players. There's still a low grumbling for a Classic Plus to add content that wasn't completed in Vanilla's original release is one example, but I predict that if something were to be added, it wouldn't be adding literally new stuff, but more like context to breathe life into what's already there. An easy example that I can think of, leaderboards for record holders, like the fastest kill of a raid boss, the fastest clear of a particular dungeon, the shortest time played to level 60. Next thing would be something along the lines of achievements, raid clears with a single class or with minimum players, special encounter requirements, I don't know, that sort of thing that's done now is my point. It's going to be acknowledged in-game rather than just from the community. It gives a small reason to pop back into WoW Classic Vanilla, whatever, because maybe you cleared Classic BC in a week or two and you need something to humor yourself in the meantime. So let's move on to this week, week 2 of Shadowlands, the last bits of warm-up until Season 1, and the real expansion begins for the real WoW players, the raiders, and the PvPers, and the dungeon people. I'm just kidding about the real part, but pretty soon the game's really going to open up and Shadowlands will be put to a very real test of how well it holds up to competitive-minded players throwing themselves against endgame content. In fact, in a way, the test has already begun. During this week, I've observed behavior that helps illuminate what feels like the unsolvable problem in WoW. It's a made-up term that I call the cycle of toxicity. Let me try that again. The cycle of toxicity. And it probably exists in many other games that support a competitive scene. A lot of these observations came from watching my own guild, so yeah, there's bias, I'm not going to argue that, but maybe by the end you'll see where I'm coming from. As someone who runs an AOTC guild that's going to start raiding straight away, I try to get people excited about preparing, gathering materials, sharing them with others and our guild bank so we can be armed with consumables and legendaries and other such things once the season starts. But more importantly, I want people to kind of warm up by running dungeons, diving into Torghast, and whatever, so they can get used to their classes, so they can, I guess, reacquaint themselves with the team, and the new people can get acclimated. I could see like 30 or so people online, and a group would start to form for dungeons, whether it's mythic, heroic, or even normal dungeons. Guild chat would light up, calling for people to fill roles, and more often than I'd like, I wouldn't see a peep. Now, let's be fair though. Hollering for a group does not mean everyone drops what they're doing to answer the call. Every reason under the sun is fair game. Except one, at least for me. I talked with a few of these folks, and I found that they feel a bit skittish about joining the group because they aren't ready. Not because they don't feel ready, but they would say that they are not ready. They never did the dungeon before. They don't have the gear. They didn't read up. Like, dude, I'm hearing this in the first week of the expansion. This is in guild, which should be a safe space, right? I hadn't even done the dungeons yet, but some of these folks feel like if they don't hit a certain bar, that they're going to be ostracized by the guild as being a baddie or something, and for a while, I didn't get it. I also perused the forums, and the Twitters, and the trade chats to find reinforcement of the same behavior that we're very familiar with. Chats or the group finder with listings like LFG Mythic something or other must have an item level of 185 or something. Posts from players being kicked from groups because, of course, without knowing any further context, that they lack the encounter knowledge or where dungeon skips are. Leaving a group because your legendary didn't drop, that's a legit thing that's been sort of addressed, but I've also heard suggestions that these should have been drops from the final bosses in a dungeon. It doesn't seem to have any downsides, and I think that would have been the silver bullet that ultimately solves that grouping problem. But going back to guilds, I think I can better understand at least one reason why some members, especially new ones, are a little tepid about answering the call for invites to groups. It's the same reason why many out there don't like being part of a guild, and it's that clique-like nature. We've all seen it. In a guild, you have this close-knit group of people who may or may not be elitist, but they might give that impression or vibe. Even on my team, we see new names and we're like, ooh, who's the new guy? Fresh meat, right? There's being in the guild, and then there's being in the guild, you know what I mean? More broadly, these players just want to make their first impression when joining a group a good one. What's funny is that that's how I felt whenever I'd be part of a pug. I'd always want to make a good impression because this first interaction could be my last. And having to do that constantly on a daily or whatever basis is mentally exhausting for me. But next week is going to be interesting for my team, and I do wonder how these new people, assuming that they show up for raid, are going to handle raiding with me and my team, because I don't know if it's been made clear to them that we go into new raids with zero encounter knowledge. In fact, I tell people to not open that dungeon journal or whatever for a while so we can get a feel of what Blizzard had designed and is trying to throw at us. But anyway, that's enough of my guild blog, whatever. Obviously, I'm expressing a very narrow perspective, just an opinion. And I'd like to get your opinion and thoughts on this too in a comment, but here's how I understand this cycle of toxicity when it comes to grouping. Folks mostly want to have a good time playing group content, right? But they don't want to get yelled at for being a baddie. To get to that point, they have this internal pressure to prepare, maybe over-prepare, by reading up and gearing up on their own. With that tempered mindset, these same people might get upset when someone who isn't prepared or experienced joins their group and gets everybody killed, leading them to wonder why that person doesn't value everyone else's time by being unprepared, and it spirals into this culture that we live in today, and we just can't fix it, unfortunately. In my years as a WoW gamer, I've learned that trying and failing is part of the fun. It's what gives meaning to the win that you get in the end. That's the vibe that I try to give out, that it's okay to wipe, we're learning together, one team, one dream, etc. On the other side is the notion of WoW as a single-player game, where it's open season on toxicity and verbal abuse because there's always the next group. The gaming world has all but fully embraced this, but WoW has built itself into a game where even co-op is competitive at the same time, thanks to what both Blizzard and the community has enabled. The release of WoW Classic didn't change that. It's a welcome escape for fans, but it's also strongly influenced by high-profile accolades that disrupt our outside perceptions of the game. Now, you might be thinking, hey bitch, that's not how I play. That's not how my realm is. That's not my guild. Heck, I'm one of them saying that's not how I operate my guild. Blizzard has said numerous times the WoW community is not a hive mind with a unified opinion on much of anything. It's a pile of these different micro-communities that represent different passions and playstyles, from guilds to communities to battle tag clusters to Discord channels to Reddit to Raider.io, all representing these different viewpoints. And we've done our best to build our own tiny little worlds of happiness inside of these with mixed success. Even if there's no single solution to make things better, I can at least remind you all at home and elsewhere that we're all out here doing our best to make the game great in our own little space, even if out there in the wilds, it's wild. That deflated like the whole thing. Let's move on. There are a few small items and hotfixes to wrap up today's weekly. Along with raising the drop rate of legendary powers from dungeons based on difficulty, the lockout for heroic dungeons has been entirely lifted, meaning you can re-enter or re-queue for dungeons at will, making this a nice quality of life change, unless you're the group that's being joined and then it kind of sucks. We've learned that the Torghast upgrades from the Maw are not just permanent unlocks, but are account-wide as well. I always found it weird that in order to earn these Torghast upgrades, you need to complete content that is not Torghast. Meanwhile, I think it sucks, but I get that the Maw upgrades are not account-wide because honestly, I don't think people would notice one way or another, because they would still be going in and repping up each day anyway. Between farming the Maw and Torghast though, I imagine more people will be taking their alts to Torghast, so I think that's Blizzard's angle. The rules for trading weapons among fellow group members have been relaxed greatly. Explaining the current rules is honestly a waste of time and brain cells, so to be clear, with regards to weapons, here we go, you can trade your weapon to someone else in your group, as long as it's the same or lower item level than what you have ever found previously. Cool? Okay, we'll see. We'll see if this ever gets relaxed a bit more, and if so, we will have won. I know you want Master Looter back, but shh, that's, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, okay? And that's the show. Next week, you can expect another video just before the Tuesday reset in the Americas region to quickly go over all that is coming in week 3 of Shadowlands, apart from the obvious Season 1 stuff. For example, it's all but certain that in Torghast, the Cellblock rotation will take us to Skoldus Halls and Coldheart Interstitia. Which one is the easier to climb, as we can now take on layers 4 through 6? You gotta come back to the channel and find out. Ha ha ha. And with no beta, I admit that I kind of feel like a hunter without the hunt, you know what I mean? But in the meantime, I'm gonna try and put out some fun content and maybe a few mini guides to help you along. I'm still having a great time in Shadowlands, and I hope that you are too. I would love to hear about your adventures in a comment below. Don't forget to like this video if it was helpful and to subscribe for more of this and all things Warcraft. We'll see you next time. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.